And it's all because my love has shown me just like clay in a potter's hand. My life was being shaped by things I could not understand. I thought that I was hurt, but not by my purpose for being healed. I was blood, and all the bad. Confusion was all I had till I learned that God sent me to be responsible and free. No more love, no more pretending. Now my life is just beginning. Making me, and it's all because you'll be so free.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, thank you for joining us this morning for All Things Human. Alhamdulillah, we just listened to the second of three parts of an address Imam Muhammad delivered in 1982 here in Oakland, California. Alhamdulillah, it's just on hypocrites is what it says in my archive. So that's what it is. So we are continuing on that under the theme for these mornings broadcasts. Of course, all things human, but then Satan, culture, history, and the Word of God. And much to be said, and on our change schedule, we're going to go ahead and get right to it. Let me tell you the prime point. I'll read the Imam's quote and then give you the emphasis. This quote is from Imam Muhammad's early publication. Of course, it was also in the 80s. As the light shineth in the east, as the light shineth in the east. Quoting him, He says the cultural trends in America reveal the satanic operation of manipulative principle covertly operating in the culture, influencing the cultural thinking. By the operation of such covert principle, the culture swings in pendulum from oppressive states to liberal states, bringing us a taste of the good times followed by a taste of hell. Near the bottom of the arc in the pendulum's swoop, social chaos and aberrant morality. This operation deceives the moral and rational vision in the common public and deny all Americans the freedom our nation proclaims. And that's a quote from As the Light Shineth in the East, published by Imam Muhammad Rahimahullah. Now, the Imam gave an example during the lecture that we just listened to, or the portion of it that we just listened to, and he just pointed out how it's very easy to manipulate this society and the strategy that is used to manipulate this society. It says it's just like you have a herd, and once you have a herd, you fire a shot, and they run in a direction away from the shot. If you want them to move left, then fire a shot on the right. If you want them to move right, then fire a shot on the left. If you want them to turn around, then fire a shot in front. That is how easily the society, in principle, meaning that the principle is that, and the society shifts according to those who have the power to fire that shot. I encourage you to look for a YouTube piece. I don't know, maybe it is still, I hope it is still up there, but up there, i.e. on YouTube. It's called The Century of the Self. The Century of the Self. The whole thing is maybe about 4 hours, but you will find this principle operating, in fact, both in the commercial and in the governmental order, etc. And you should understand that it is operating in all orders. We talk about the 4 birds as interpreted by Imam Muhammad from the statement of Abraham asking God, how will the resurrection be? And so we talk about education, we talk about economics, we talk about culture/religion, and we talk about governance, politics, those 4 main areas of society. And everything that we're speaking of is done in all of those orders, which takes in the entirety of the world that we live in and all the elements that operate within the society. We did a lecture, I don't know, whenever it was, entitled, It's a Small World After All. It's a Small World After All. Of course, you know, that's the theme in the primary Disney park, the one that originated in Southern California. You know, it's a small world after all. And it's like when you really understand the nature of how society operates and how society is influenced, you will and can know that it is a small world after all. It's a small world. We sometimes think that society is too big to be manipulated. Absolutely, my word. Absolutely not true. It is very, very manageable. And this is a part of the khair and shar of the nature of our life as human beings. And I want to say a little more about that. Imam Muhammad Rahimahullah, from our last week's portion of this Wednesday broadcast, he made it clear to us that when it comes to the Satans, right? Now, who are the Satans, right? Those people who are using knowledge over the heads of the people, those people who guide and manipulate from the shadows, and they are real individuals and institutions, etc. That's it. But to just focus on what history means to them, what history means to them is actually culture. That means that they make history through the culture. They make history through the culture. The little movie Time Bandits. Time Bandits. There's comedy, quote unquote, is presented as comedy, but it's actually a revelation, culturally speaking, about how those little people, but very powerful, manipulate and manipulated elements of history. All right. I won't go any further than that. The point is that they have their design. They have their design. We spoke of mosaic last week. They have their design that has to be fleshed out, and there is a blueprint that they are keeping to and scanning society and the behavior of the people with reference to that template, that history that they have. But then when you understand that history is something that is made, and we hear this language all the time. I mean, it's time for us to make history. We're going to make history. And people talk about being on the right side of history. So that should give you a sense that history is something that can be manufactured. History is something that can be manufactured. And there are those who do manufacture history. I mentioned to you a book, Make Believe Media, The Politics of Entertainment. And I think there's another one. It might be, and it might also be, the author's name is Michael J. Parenti, Parenti. These are older books. Like Imam Muhammad's address was 1982. So these books will go back to that kind of time frame as well. But nevertheless, these are people who are making explicit these things that people are very unconscious of. Okay, but the shaitan, those who understand this nature of human beings and nature of society and the nature of history and the like, and they use that knowledge. They don't educate people about that knowledge, but they use that knowledge, quote unquote, over the heads of the people so as to maintain control of the people in order to keep people as a herd, So what they do, they scheme to govern the life of the people, and that's what they're doing. The Imam has explained it in that quote that I just read from As the Light Shineth from the East. Now I want to read a couple of things from social scientists who that affirm what the Imam has told us as well. Dr. Jordan Peterson, he has this quote from Maps of Meaning. The book is Maps of Meaning. He's a professor from the University of Toronto. Quoting him, he says, "Something we cannot see protects us from something we do not understand. The thing we cannot see is culture in its intrapsychic or internal manifestation. The thing we do not understand is the chaos that gave rise to culture. If the structure of culture is disrupted unwittingly, chaos returns. We will do anything to defend ourselves against that return." Excuse me. So he's just speaking of this. This is the nature of life, the nature of the life of man in all periods of time, and it's not particular. He's not talking about devilish people or righteous people per se. That's just the nature of culture. Culture is something that we create in order to be a womb for our protection and growth. That is what ummah actually is, brother and sister. What that is what ummah properly. When God says, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٍ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, let there arise out of you an ummah, a more explicit term for us is culture, because we all live inside of a culture. And if you are not constructing your own culture, you by default are living inside of somebody else's culture. And the nature of culture as a womb shapes everyone in it according to its values, motivations, influences, etc. The culture is a mold. Okay, a ummah is a mold. So when Allah tells us, look, every human being does it. All human beings do it. All throughout history, human beings have. That's the only way you get to civilization. That's the only way you get to progress. So that's the only way you get to some stability and some security, etc. You have to get to culture, and that culture then becomes the wall. That culture becomes the protection. But also, just as a wall protects from what's on the outside, it also holds what's on the inside from going outside. It's a trade-off for that. You get a certain security, a certain stability, a certain protection, but you also get limited by that culture and the boundaries. And those boundaries, as the doctor says in his quote, it's an intrapsychic or internal manifestation, right? It's something culture gets inside of you. So they're the what is called the instantiated world, the culturally instantiated world, with all whatever you have. You have monuments and memorials and music and whatever, clothes and food and songs and everything else, all of which are in some way speaking out to you the values that are represented by the memorials and the monuments and the memories, the history and the dress and the food, etc. There's a message being sent by all that, and those messages have been processed and produced in support of the construction intended by those culture creators who have the sense of responsibility to build the world in which their people, whoever their people are, is to live. So there's benefit and there's harm. There's freedom and then there's also limitation. Okay, but most people in culture, they don't know how they are enculturated. And so this is why it says something we cannot see protects us from something we do not understand. The thing that was, I'll mention a book, Dr. Ravi Batra, another old book, old in our terms. No, it escapes me right now. It has to do with cycles. Let me see if I can. It's important to know, I believe, because the cycles that we're going through, I can't think of the name of it right now. I'll give it one more shot. Any case, you can go ahead and whatever, Google him or whatever like that. But basically, it points out that there are four cycles that societies go through. There's the laborers' era, the warriors' era, the intellectual era, and the acquisitors' era. And those four cycles, and it's like rinse and repeat. every society goes through it. But the point is that for the laborers era is characterized by primitive primitive life. There was low respect for law, etc., chaos, disorder, etc., etc. Then what rises out of that is a military, a martial class. Those people say, no, we got to have some order around here. And when that comes for a society, then you get the warriors era, meaning that's who is strong enough in order to put their hand over the matter and bring everybody into some kind of order, obedience, etc. No matter how resistant they are, the point is there's an order arises that said, no, there's going to be order here. And then in time, that military base, that martial instinct that was useful in order to bring order out of chaos for the survival of the group itself, in time, it becomes oppressive. And in it becoming oppressive, then there has to become an intellectual class that can manage the masses in such a way that the warrior class, you still have the authority, you still have the control and the management and the stability, therefore, of whatever it might be. It could be the tribe or it could be the nation, because the cycles just go on at different levels. And so then actually it's the intellectuals that are in charge, because the warriors are dependent on the intellectuals' ability to keep the hearts and minds of the masses in check and continue to salute the warriors. But those intellectuals that serve that purpose, they are benefiting from the powers that be. That's when you start talking about fascism and things like that. And that's in our more recent part of history. But moving past that, there was a competition as to who's going to be the advisor to the warrior king. So there was a battle between those intellectuals that won, and then there were the intellectuals that lost. The intellectuals that lost the battle, they're not ignorant, they're still intelligent. But since they don't have power with the government, they wind up going into material acquisition. So it's a whole intellectual class that goes into getting wealth, because what will happen is, as long as those intellectuals justify the behavior of the warrior, and the warrior continues to make war and also not respect limitations that have to be respected, the point is he's going to get overextended. They get overextended, and the heavy taxing and all the rest of that, in order to maintain their way of living and their power and expand their territories and their empires, etc. Pretty soon that just becomes overwhelming for the people at large, just in terms of death and taxes, how that impacts the mass of people. Okay, in the meantime, you have the inquisitors over there on the other side saying, man, let them fools do what they do. And it's like, we're just going to keep acquiring property. Sooner or later, they're going to have to come around to us, because he won't be able to afford, that is the warrior class. They won't be able to afford what they're doing. And the intellectual class, they don't produce anything anyway. They're just benefiting by manipulating the power of the throne. Pretty soon, they're all going to be broken. They'll have to come to me. The Inquisitor class. Okay, then you get into the Inquisitors era, and in the Inquisitors era, then they just consume until everybody's poor under them, meaning that they economically dominate people until everybody's poor. And then what that does, that brings about a collapse in the society, and then everybody gets leveled down to like the laborer era all over again, and it starts all over again. All right, so you can find it. I'm looking at a page that I could point to the periods of history for everything that I've just talked about. But we won't do that. I'm going to go back to therefore, every society comes out of some chaos. Gangs of New York, the movie Gangs of New York, that whoever DiCaprio dude, Gangs of New York, 3-hour movie. But they're telling you that's the chaos that New York came from. All these immigrants that come over, everybody have their own ideas. Everybody want to have their own world. Everybody wants to import their values from where they came to establish it in this society. Well, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to fight your way to doing that. Okay, that's true for everything. That's true for everything. So the point is that once a culture gets established, it's really established upon the embrace of the people who have been acculturated, who are inculturated, who are socialized by their culture internally, intrapsychically. It has to be what you call a cultural consensus trance. I'm gonna give you this. So somebody is interested in, you should be, because everything I'm telling you now is what we're supposed to be doing. وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. What I'm talking to you about, this is what we are supposed to be doing. When we say building ummah, when we say building ummah, then you're supposed to be building culture. I want to read this to you. A book, Charles T. Tart. The book is Waking Up, Overcoming the Obstacles to Human Potential. And all that I'm saying, brother and sister, it's like I'd have to tell you another one. The Dark City. The Dark City, I believe that's the movie. But the point is that, and that has to do with everybody being put to sleep and not knowing what happened while they were asleep. And then when they wake up, you might go to sleep poor. Then you're deprived of the memory of the fact that you went to sleep poor. Then when you wake up, you may be rich. But the overlords, who are aliens in the situation, they are testing to see how different are people if they're put in different situations. Is it nature or is it nurture? And so the point is, there was one person in there who never went to sleep. And because he never went to sleep, he became the problem and he became the target. Well, that's really a metaphor and analogy for what is really true about this society. If you are asleep, if you are a product of this culture and you don't know how or if or that you should question its construction and what makes it what it is, then you are somnambulistic. You're sleepwalking. You're sleepwalking. But then that's what culture looked at as something having its own aims. That's what culture wants you to be, a sleepwalker. In his book, Waking Up, Overcoming the Obstacles to Human Potential, because that is the obstacle to human potential. And let me be very clear, the Islamic foundation vocabulary for everything I'm saying, I'm very conscious of it, or just can't teach it all the way through. We'll run out of time faster. But I'll say this, taqwa. Taqwa is someone who is woke. If you're muttaqi, you are awoke. If you're muttaqi, you are conscious, but you are conscious in the way that God wants you to be conscious. That's taqwa. God consciousness is being conscious the way that God wants you to be conscious. When you're conscious in the way that Allah wants you to be conscious, that is the expression and the opening for the growth of your human potential. But let me read this because I want to deal with the issue of our being unconscious and the nature of that being the desire for any culture. It wants you to be unconscious. Let's move on, because there's khair and shar in everything that I'm saying. There's the plus and there's the minus side of it. When the Quran says, and the believers say, Sami'na wa ata'ana, Sami'na wa ata'ana, we hear and we obey. The psychological, neurological fact of that is stimulus response. It means we hear and we obey. We hear and we do what we're told to do. Now, that's what's done in this society at large, but the invitations of the society are not always good. And because the invitation of society is not always good, to hear and obey in a culture that is itself not good, that's not good. So hearing and obey, yeah, that's a good place to go when you're in a good culture. But when you're in a bad culture, to hear and obey, that's not a good thing. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qualifies our culture. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٍ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, calling to all that is excellent and best under the circumstance. تَأْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. You see, that's culture, but it's Islamic culture. It's divine culture. That will be Khalifa when we do it, when we get it straight. That is the Khalifa that we're looking for. But that's the way that human beings are, whether they are in a good or a bad culture. So this is why God said human beings are going to be in culture, period. Culture is a byproduct of humanity. That's what we do culture. Why? Because it's necessary for all the reasons I've already explained. So God is saying, look, yeah, you're going to do that, but do it this way, right? Do it this way. This is the one I want, because when you have it that way, now you have created a womb, a garden, if you will, for the flourishing that I want you to have. But let's cover this. Understand this nature of culture, and then understand why you need to have taqwa, be conscious in the way that God would have you be conscious, and construct your culture with an awareness. Stop thinking culture is just the aesthetics of culture. Let's move on. So Charles T. Tart is the author's name. What he does, he explains the nature and function of culture. He states, from a culture's point of view, it is far better if your everyday mind, the habitual automatized way you think and feel, is shaped to reflect the cultural's consensus, beliefs, and values. It's as though, if I want you to have an opinion, I'll give you one. That's the nature of culture. That's the nature of culture. But you want to make sure that you have a good culture, so that the opinions that get that you get enculturated with, i.e., the beliefs and the values, are those that would be fine if you responded to them automatically, because you're automatically and always and habitually doing good things, right things, all right, that serve the plan and the ideal of God. It says, so from a cultural point of view, that your everyday mind, the habitual automatized way you think and feel, is shaped to reflect the culture's consensus of beliefs and values. Then you will automatically experience the right perceptions and interpretations, and so it will be natural to act in the culturally appropriate way, even when there are no agents of social coercion around. When you automatically think, behave, and feel normally, when the internal workings of your mind automatically echo most of the values and beliefs of your culture, you have achieved cultural consensus trance. The interlocking set of beliefs includes a belief that we don't have a belief system. Foreigners have strange beliefs, but we know what's right. We could talk about white supremacy and its instantiation and people being socialized and acculturated under white supremacy, the caste system, the reasons that we seem to, and what we need to get is to understand, listen, the police who have the kinds of problems that we've seen, not all police are in that condition, in that situation, but the other authorities, you got educational establishment, economic establishment, political establishment. What's going on with the voting suppression right now? I think Isabel Wilkerson, in her book Caste, I think she does the most excellent contemporary job in understanding. Listen, it's in the fabric, it's in the nature of the culture. It's been instantiated in the intrapsychic aspects of people who have been on the apparently beneficial side of the caste system. in so many ways, brothers and sisters. We need to understand they can't help it. They can't help it. I think James Baldwin does, if I can dare judge this aspect of does a great job of saying like he said, you need me to be a nigga. If I stop being a nigga, then it's going to be a problem for your order. Your order dictates that there be niggas. Niggas are the scapegoats of everything. And whenever a nigga try to move himself, as you define him, out of the position of being a scapegoat, he's bringing about disorder in the culture that you have instantiated upon white supremacy. So this is the problem with the culture. The culture is grounded in white supremacy, quote unquote, which is an oxymoron, not true, what have you, but it is what it is. That's the language that's used. But it's a caste system. And everything that's happening, those who are trying to break out of that caste system, that's why the natural reaction, as Peterson said in his quote, he says, if the structure of culture is disrupted unwittingly, chaos returns, and we will do. Now, who's we? We is whoever feels that if their, quote, culture is undermined, they are dead. You want to remove my flag. You want to remove my anthem. You want to remove my statues. You want to remove that. You are trying to kill my culture. You trying to kill my culture. This whole idea of cancel culture, whatever that is. I haven't looked at the deep definition of it, but that comes to mind right there. So it's like you are the enemy. So we have these very strong oppositions because it is a matter of life and death in the psychic sense. And that's the most important place, as the Imam spoke to this in the lecture that we listened to. So the point is the whole Black Lives Matter and all the rest of that, the cancel culture, all the rest of that. This is a part of the chaos that there are those who will do anything, and it's repeated, anything to defend themselves against that destruction, that disordering, right? So it's very important for us to understand that nature of culture. And we're saying what we're saying in order for us to understand that there's some very conscious acts that we have to undertake, both individually and collectively, to protect ourselves from the harmful influences of the culture as it is instantiated right now, and at the same time build that culture that Allah has ordered us to build in the Quran and as Muslims. And we have to see those places where we are inhabited, right? You think about that word habitat, right? Why is it called habitat? Because that's where you get your habits at. That's where you get your habits. Where you get your habits? You get your habits from your habitat. That's why it's called habitat. That's where you get your habits from. So we have to develop another habitat, another culture, another womb, ummah, etc. So that what? So that we can create a new kind of mind, a new kind of consciousness, a new kind of society. But if you don't understand how you are in the consensus trance of the society that acculturated you, then it's like Carter G. Woodson's statement. It's not like it is Carter G. Woodson's statement. If you control a man's mind, you don't have to worry about his behavior because he's automatically going to do what he's been conditioned to do. So you have to be conscious of as to whether you're hypnotized by this society, acculturated to such a point that even its entertainment, when you say entertainment, it's a way of you being held on the inside. They're holding you on the inside. All right. All right. So let's see. I'll read one more quote with the emphasis being we have to become conscious of ourselves on the inside, understanding how much of our habitual behavior is from the intrapsychic influence of the culture that socialized us when we were unconscious. Now we have to wake up out of and be aware of how we are held on the inside by this society, such that our thinking and our behavior is contained inside the confines of a culture that doesn't have our interest and our destiny in mind. Okay. So another book, Genesis, the Genesis and Development of a Scientific Fact. The author is Fleck, Ludwig Fleck, F-L-E-C-K. The Genesis and Development of a Scientific Fact. He says, the greatest error of individualistic psychology is the assumption that a person thinks. This leads to a continual search for the source of thought within the individual himself, and for the reasons why he thinks in a particular way and not in any other. What actually thinks within a person is not the individual himself, but his social community. I have a couple of sentences more, but I want to stop right here. He says, what actually thinks within a person is not the individual, but his social community. Brother and sister, much support for this idea, but let's just limit it to just this. When we say assalamu alaikum, we say assalamu alaikum. That's plural, assalamu alaikum. So there's a whole community inside of us. What community is inside of us? The community inside of us is the community that socialized us. Quran 1784. Everyone acts according to the way they've been socialized. What does that mean? The way you've been socialized, it means that you have internalized your community. You have internalized your community, and you get your identity from your socializing community. You are your community. You are who socialized you. You are what socialized you. You are what acculturated you. The prophet said everyone is born on fitr, but it is there, and the term that's used, abawahu, abawahu. And you hear father in the root of that, abawahu, the father. And when those people of the prophet's time, and then the revelation of Quran, and before the Prophet Muhammad's time, they said, come follow the ways of God. They said, no, we'll follow the ways of our fathers. We'll follow the ways of our fathers. Okay, well, there you go, right there. The ways of our fathers represent the cultural construction. And that's why that's another place where in symbolic, figurative, metaphorical language, longer conversation, metaphorical language, father, culture is father. Culture is, I know, I'm a student of Imam Muhammad too. You got to understand the father as the wall that creates the boundaries that we're talking about in terms of culture. And so on some sides, the father is an oppressor, but on the other side, the father is a liberator, and that's the nature of a wall also. And yes, there's also the place where culture is the female, because it has a womb-like function. But let's circle back on this, that what actually thinks within the person is not the individual himself, but his social community. So when it says everyone is born on fitra, but it is their abawahu, it is abawahu that makes them otherwise, Jew, Christian, Magan, etc. That's talking about the culture. That's talking about the culture. And the culture gives you your thinking, right? That's why you have to pick the right culture in order to have the right thinking. And if you're not consciously choosing your thought, then you're thinking habitually with the cultural thought, mindset, etc., that was given to you when you were socialized at a time when you were unconscious of your own molding and shaping by your environment. Let's finish this quote. He said, the source of his thinking is not within himself, but it is to be found in his social environment and in the various social atmosphere he breathes. So you think about the young people that you would like to be different in some kind of way. Well, you got to look at what is shaping them on the inside, what is molding them on the inside, what quote unquote social group do they belong to? Where do they get their beliefs and values from? And wherever that is, that is what they are internalizing, and that's what's modeled for them. That's what they're absorbing, and that's what's impressing them, and that's what you get as an expression from them. And if we don't provide an alternative for them that satisfies the natural needs that these other things satisfy, but in unhealthy ways, then we won't win that battle. Because they are being brought deeper into the value system that entertains them. Okay, that entertainment is containment, so they are contained by their entertainment, and so that becomes a prison for them. And we're trying to set them free from that, but therein lies the some culture says therein lies the rub. And so that's where we have to be more scientific in our understanding of what is required for release, what is required for the freedom in the way that we're talking about, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, without killing the patient, or without creating a cure that's worse than the disease. Yes, it's not simple. And that's why we need our own bona fide social scientists to go to work on that project. All right, finishing the quote. The source of his thinking is not within himself, but is to be found in his social environment and in the very social atmosphere he breathes. His mind is structured, and necessarily so, under the influence of this ever-present social environment, and he cannot think in any other way. End of quote. So, are you conscious of the source of your thinking? Are you conscious of the way that you think? Are you conscious of why you think the way you think? Are you conscious of your vocabulary? Are you conscious of why you use these words, etc.? Are you aware of what kind of mindset or what kind of mental patterns they come from and behaviors that they lead to? That's a person that's awake. That's a person that's conscious. That's a person that is not living the life of an animal, where the herder can fire a shot on the left and get them running to the right, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess part of the message is let's wake up. So inshallah, life goes on. This is what we have to say today. So inshallah, there'll be more at another time. Thank you so much. God's peace be on you. Have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.